Today, we are going to be discussing the efficacy surrounding the heterologous vaccination approach. Hello and welcome. My name is Lindsay Dixon and I'm a pharmacist from British Columbia, Canada. Today, we are going to be discussing the efficacy surrounding the heterologous vaccination approach. What is this? This is when we have a different vaccine for the second dose of COVID-19 vaccination than for the first dose. I will be discussing two different studies, one from Spain and one from Germany, that looked at this approach and how effective it is for immunity. First of all, I would like to point out that it is very important that you do get your second dose regardless of which vaccine it is. The data that we are seeing is showing that the second dose provides a long-lasting and much more effective efficacy rate than just getting the first dose on its own. Getting the second dose is especially important right now because of the variants of concern that have become dominant. And right now, all of the vaccines are showing very good efficacy against these variants. With one dose, we are seeing efficacy drop to as low as 30% over time. By ensuring that you do get your second dose, there is very high protection against all of the variants and also very high protection from severe disease, hospitalization, and death. So the second dose is of utmost importance regardless of what dose you decide that you should get. It's important to realize that many different countries in the world are considering this approach. Norway, Denmark, Finland, and many other countries are looking at the heterologous vaccination approach, and this is largely due to supply issues. Some countries have stopped the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine, and this is causing supply issues. Also, we see different variants that are becoming more dominant, and so it is in the global interest for everyone to receive their second dose of vaccination as soon as possible. In a previous video, I spoke about the side effects of this type of vaccination approach. It is important to know that it is not unusual to see an increase in side effects after the second dose. Right now, we have studies that are showing that there might be an increase in side effects and other studies that are showing that there might not. Everybody is different. Everyone's body will react differently. Regardless of which vaccine you decide on for your second dose, there is the potential for more severe side effects. We see this with vaccines on a regular basis, and this is because the immune system is being stimulated once again to generate an immune response. And when this happens, you do feel side effects like headache, fatigue, soreness at the injection site. These are all signs that your body is reacting and producing an adequate immune response. What you could do is just plan to take the day off on the day of your vaccine and maybe the day after. Depending on how you feel, you'll be able to just take it easy for a couple of days after that. Now, if we're comparing Pfizer and Moderna, these vaccines have not been compared in trials yet. So we do not have data on efficacy of whether it is better to get the Moderna vaccine after the AstraZeneca or the Pfizer vaccine after the AstraZeneca. Now, these vaccines are so similar that it's expected that there won't be much of a difference as far as efficacy or side effects. And NACI, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization in Canada, has actually said that these vaccines could be considered interchangeable if there are supply issues. So if you did get, say, the Pfizer vaccine as your first dose and there wasn't enough Pfizer for the second dose, then they are saying that if necessary, and depending on your risk level and depending on the level of infection in your community, it may be in your best interest to get your second dose rather than, say, wait for that Pfizer dose. So that is something that NACI has said is okay, and these vaccines could be considered to be interchangeable because they are so similar. In order to understand why scientists think this should work, independent of the data that I'm about to share with you, we need to understand that both approaches to vaccination, so the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which is an adenovirus vector vaccine, and the mRNA vaccines, all do the same essential function. They expose the body to the spike protein. So the immune system, if ever confronted with that spike protein, will recognize the spike protein. So the way that these vaccines show your body the spike protein is kind of like if you saw someone walking down the street and they're wearing a yellow baseball cap, and you're standing on one side of the street and you see that person wearing the yellow baseball cap. And then a couple of weeks later, you are on the other side of the street and you see the person wearing the yellow baseball cap, and you say to yourself, hey, I've seen that person before. I remember that yellow baseball cap. That's what it's like when your immune system sees the spike protein. Now, the first time you saw the person in the yellow baseball cap, you might not have really paid attention. But the second time, you remember. That's what we need the immune system to do, is generate immune memory. And that's how these vaccines are doing that, independent of which type of vaccine that you receive. What are the contraindications to an mRNA vaccine? Well, one of the contraindications is an allergy to any component in the mRNA vaccines. So one of the allergens that have been noted is polyethylene glycol. Polyethylene glycol is actually all around us. It's used in a lot of cosmetics. It's even used in some types of manufactured foods. So if you have an allergy to polyethylene glycol, it is highly likely that you already know about it. So that would be a contraindication to you receiving the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccines. Now, tromethamine is something that is found in the Moderna vaccine only. Tromethamine is also a very rare allergy. So if you do have an allergy to tromethamine, that would be a contraindication to you receiving the Moderna vaccine, but you could still receive the Pfizer vaccine. The other contraindication to receiving an mRNA vaccine, or any vaccine for that matter, would be if you have some type of symptomatic infection, including COVID-19. If you are symptomatic, it is not recommended that you be vaccinated until all of your symptoms have resolved. So those are two contraindications to you receiving a second dose of mRNA vaccine. The other question that arises is, well, if I had one vaccine for my first dose and then I had another vaccine for my second dose, am I considered to be fully vaccinated at that point? Yes, you do not need to worry about getting a third dose. After you get your second dose of COVID-19 vaccine, independent of which brand or which manufacturer you've received, you are considered to be fully vaccinated. Now, you do have to wait 3 to 4 weeks after your second dose for you to have the full protection or full efficacy from your vaccination. And it's also a good time to remind everyone that you do not have any protection from SARS-CoV-2 until you are at least 3 to 4 weeks after your first dose of vaccine. So after your first dose, you start to have some protection after 3 to 4 weeks, but you do not have the full efficacy and full protection until 3 to 4 weeks after your second dose. So the studies that we have to date are as follows. We have a small study out of Germany. This study looked at side effect profile, T-cell response, and antibody response. Participants were given the AstraZeneca vaccine first, and 8 weeks later, they were given the Pfizer vaccine. They observed that those who received the second dose of their Pfizer vaccine had less side effects than when they had the first dose of AstraZeneca. When they looked at the immune response of this approach, they observed very high efficacy, and in some cases, efficacy was even higher than if the patients had just had Pfizer plus Pfizer. So there is reason to believe that this approach may not only be effective, but in some cases could be even more effective than what we call the homologous approach, or having the same vaccine for both doses. Now, they also showed that with this approach, there was very high ability to neutralize the variants of concern. The only variant that they did not note here was the Gamma variant, otherwise known as the P1 variant, or the variant that we see that arose out of Brazil. So that is also very good news. The CombivacS study out of Spain evaluated over 600 participants, and again, they gave the AstraZeneca vaccine first, followed by the Pfizer vaccine. In this study, they observed that the neutralizing antibodies were up to 7 times higher than those who had only received their first dose of AstraZeneca. It's important to remind you that in this study, which I've spoken about in previous videos, they did not note any serious adverse events or any severe side effects. So in conclusion, the data that we have so far is showing that this is a highly effective approach. Now, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization still recommends that if you've had an mRNA vaccine for your first dose, that you continue with an mRNA vaccine for your second dose, and that you not mix them unless it is necessary. The reason is that we do not have studies yet that are showing whether it is safe and effective or what the safety and efficacy is with combining the mRNA vaccines. As I've said, in theory, it should be okay, but we do not have data on this, and so we cannot recommend it until there is data. So I hope this will help you make a decision on what you should do for your COVID-19 vaccination. In the description of this video, I will also add an excellent decision-making tool that was created out of the University of Waterloo. This is a really easy to understand, easy to read decision-making tool that will help you evaluate what the best decision is for you in your circumstance. If you're finding value in these videos, I would encourage you to subscribe and click on the notifications bell. That allows you to receive notifications of future videos as I continue to keep you updated on all things concerning COVID-19, as well as other important health topics as they arise. And thank you to Heart Pharmacy for sponsoring this video. If you'd like to sign up for their newsletter, you can sign up at www.heartpharmacy.com/newsletter for all of your updates on vaccination, home care programs, and other relevant health topics. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that this was helpful. Take care and stay healthy. Bye-bye.